Hey there, and welcome to another video. This is going to be the full process of painting the Drova cover art. Drova is a pixel art RPG game which recently came out, and a couple years ago I had the chance to work with Just 2D Interactive, the developer, on this cover and a few other in-game paintings. Those were actually done in pixel art style, but this is just a regular illustration. So here you can see me starting out with the first sketch that I then later sent to them, and I will do a couple more and you will see all that happening soon. Here on screen, this is all sped up since it's recorded automatically in Procreate. So I did all of this actually on the iPad in Procreate, and yeah, started out like using just a rough line art style, paired with a little bit of value, meaning tone, adding a couple of darker areas or highlights here and there, but it's mostly a rough line drawing, So I just like to mix it up and not be too strict with, the tool or the style I'm using to create my sketches. So one day it's just a couple values straight away without any lines, just started to paint. And then the next day it might just be like rough line drawing like this, and then I fill it out with underlying value or color. And so here you can see that latter approach, I guess. And this is another sketch with a different composition this time. We have the character standing on the cliff a little bit higher up in the composition towards the top right corner. And so the general brief was to show a landscape, a part of the game world that we can just see or get a taste for what there is to explore and have that nice view. Here I'm already back at the other one, starting to maybe push it a little bit further. And in the next step, I'm gonna duplicate it 3 times. So I have, right here, I have 4 of those to just play around with some different mood and color at this stage. So I thought, that's enough kind of for a basic layout. We have the figure standing on the cliff in front of the vast landscape, and then we can just, without losing anything, or having to be afraid of progress, I guess, you can just try different colors and moods and contrasts, lighting, whatever you want, and then you can still go back and try even more of those in case none of these work for either you or the client. And then after this stage, I sent it to the team, to Just 2D, and we had a talk also with the publisher, and then decided to go, I think it was now the bottom left one, which at this point it was a daylight sort of mood. Then later, actually in the final cover, it again changed to more of a dusk setting with the sun going down, but you will see that come up. And I think this is already after sketch selection, and we went for this kind of composition. And here I'm trying more color variations on this particular sketch before actually really starting to go into more detail or really working on the painting itself. This is still about figuring out color and trying different things. So that was kind of a, again, daylight mood with green hills and forests, and now we're more of this might be a morning lighting, and I'm going pretty wild here, switching all the time, all the different moods, and using tools like Recolor in Procreate, which is an excellent little helper for quickly changing colors in your painting, as well as gradient maps, or there are so many other tools that you can use to just get different results very quickly in terms of color, especially in digital. But just use whatever you like to use, feel comfortable with, and have fun with, especially. Just progressing with these color sketches now. And again, the reason this is switching like all the time is because I'm not working too long on one of those iterations. It's more like I'm turning on and off layers like all the time, pushing them further bit by bit, you know, and so I have a kind of similar stage for all of them, and then I send it to the client again. So I don't waste time working on one of those longer. That's just the way I like to do it sometimes. And then it's easy, you know, even if you push one of these further in the end, let's say the daylight one with the greens, then it's still easy to switch up the color, but leave the detail or whatever you have already painted in there, just leave it in. Especially, you know, if you're going with this digital medium, it's so easy to keep what you've already painted and then just switch up the mood and then continue with the painting. Obviously, in the later stages, once you further into detail, it might be harder to do that. But if you're early like this and you stay kind of rough still, then it's no problem to change the mood and make big decisions before committing to anything. But at this point, we actually did commit, so this is already kind of the color scheme for what it's going to be in its final form. So we have the sunset kind of behind that tower back there, and you know, the colors all over the painting are kind of what they're supposed to be later on. And what I'm doing here is I actually shrink down the image inside the canvas in size. So, and then I could extend it to the edges. So all the elements are a bit smaller in frame, and the picture itself has more breathing room. So we have more sky visible, we have more room for the sides of the rock and the tree and the forest and all of that. So just a little bit more epic, I guess, or you know, there's just more to see because we were a little bit too zoomed in before maybe, and also considering there needs to be room for a title somewhere later on. That's why I extended the image. And from here on out, it's simply about, you know, a back and forth with the client, adding details, just continuing the painting in terms of just rendering, but then also getting feedback and incorporating what they need for the game world, you know, because it's a world they've already created and they know what this place is supposed to be. And you know, there's a little camp down there by the, actually it might not be so little, it's a whole village and ruins and everything, but there's something located down there by the tower. You will see that come in later. And you know, just the geography and everything, where's which forests, kind of where the river's flowing and all that. It's not really coincidence, it's actually something we discussed. And then I have to kind of translate that to the painting. But other than that, I'm actually just continuing to detail and figuring out the colors more precisely, trying to just make it look nice. And in some stages, like here, there's not actually too much changing too quickly because I'm, you know, sometimes just testing some brush strokes or even brushes that might or might not work for this painting. And, you know, maybe just even testing the style a little bit here and there. How soft do I want the clouds to be? And how do I go about, you know, the next step? So it's like testing the waters almost in the middle of the painting sometimes to see what do I want to do, or how do I actually want to approach this or that section. Like here, we're still designing the tower because I think it wasn't ready yet in terms of what it's actually looking like from far away. The top of the tower wasn't fully designed yet, so I had the chance to think about that a little bit and try some different shapes. And we ended up, I think, with a pretty simple one, actually, kind of roundish tower with some romantic arches in there, and a pretty simple design, actually. So nothing like what you're seeing on the screen right now. Those are kind of more fantastical or weird looking towers, you know. And this is also a stage that I iterated on the tower and then had like 3 different versions in the end that I sent to the client again. And then we talked about that a little bit, and then ended up with this simple tower version that you will see later on. And also, the image is still quite dark right now, especially the foreground, which can be kind of cool looking, but I will lighten it up later on just to have more readability in there and just have it look more inviting in general. Also, the character was still very generic. Before, with his cloak, it was basically just a silhouette sketch. So now I put in like a silhouette where you can see more of his face, and he's actually a bit more interesting pose, indicated like a little axe hanging on his hip there. This will become more thought out, you know, design in terms of outfit, clothing, and now he's getting a shield and all of that, trying different hairstyles and still playing around with the pose and all. So yeah, the character was also an important element of the whole thing. So still coming back to the tower once in a while, because that still is not the final version. But yeah, I usually like to, you know, not just work on one spot for too long. I just feel like progressing the entire painting at the same time almost. Or I'm just too impatient to just focus on just one particular area for too long. That might also be just an excuse. But it's gonna come together in the end and have much more detail in general than what we see now. Actually, looks pretty funny that a jitter of the brushstrokes that you can see like jumping around all the time. It's just because it's so fast forward in the video itself, and B is also because I'm undoing sometimes, and then the brushstroke like comes in and then it gets deleted again almost, and it comes back, you know, in another spot. So that's just because of working digitally that you get that kind of effect once you fast forward these process videos. So at this point we are working a little bit more on the foreground, putting in more detail, some moss and grass and some little flowers, just, you know, making myself believe in this place a little more even while painting it, you know, having it more real and kind of relatable in a way. So it's just good to have some elements in there for scale, you know, that it doesn't feel so empty and, I don't know, just more realistic and believable, like I said. So that's what all those little details and flowers and little twigs and everything, they're serving that purpose. And also some of the trees are more scaled down now. We have smaller brushstrokes in the forest that also set the scale for the distance and those woods and hills and so on. So it makes more sense in the background as well, just in terms of size and scale. even more small details already. And some birds. Those always help. You know, bring a place like this alive a little more. And again, they help with the scale as well and the distance. And now we see those ruins that I was talking about before come in. All the way back there below the tower. In the fields, we have like a huge camp built into old ruins. And later on there will be more, some tents, cloth, a little fire, and some other elements that suggest that this place is inhabited actually and used, and it's not just these ruins and silhouettes. And yeah, at this point also the tower is much closer to the final version. I think in the end it's taller even and bigger, but just in terms of its basic shape, it's already close to the final version. And if you're wondering what's happening here, it's just that I turned off the layers, or I'm actually starting to really split the image into layers, because after all it's easier to work on some of these things like the foreground, midground, or the sky once you have them on separate layers. So you can see that pretty well here. And it just looks weird sometimes once you turn off all the other elements and then just paint on only, let's say, the sky in that case, or the midground here. But yeah, it helps me just get more structure into there, and it makes edits possible and much more easy, so if the client just wants something moved up a notch, or just changes in any way, it's easier for me to incorporate those if I have layers. So here I'm even getting rid of the clouds in my sky, and you see I cut them out before, and now their edges are too hard because I used the lasso tool to get them, but I will soften those manually, by just painting and smudging later on. But at least now I have them separate, and I think it should be like 5 layers at this point. So we have the foreground, the figure, and then the landscape, sky, and the clouds. And you saw maybe the tree on the right hand side in the foreground. It also went through some changes, so it was like a random blob of a tree in the beginning, and then it went through the sort of pine tree, with needles version, and then now it's back to being a tree with just leaves, like an old oak or something. So in the end, this just looked nicer, or at least in this case it fitted the image better probably. And actually just noticed myself those clouds below in the valley, just above the rivers and the forest, below the character, those also are already on their own layer, so I could edit them separately and move them around a little. So yeah, here I turned them off, so it should be 6 layers now. Yeah, this is basically the advantage, and now I can paint some detail in forest without worrying about the fog and the clouds. And if they in the end want to move those clouds or remove them even, then there will still be detail underneath. And I think they wanted to do a little animation even for the main screen, the main menu. I don't know if they actually did it in the end, but it's still good to have. And yeah, here this is me actually editing those clouds, getting rid of any, artifacts or leftovers from cutting them out previously, because I want them to be kind of clean, so once the client then later, without me, wants to move them around, and some artifacts do show up, like some leftover little green pixel of a tree or something. I don't want that, so I took care of, you know, looking at them like almost like with a green screen behind them. In this case it was just a black screen, but something that makes you see their silhouettes very clearly and enables you to find those mistakes if there are any, and you can get rid of them. All right, we are actually nearing the completion of this soon. There's just some fixes here and there to be made and clean up, you know, some of these layers behind other layers, and detailing a little further some of the areas that still require it, or that just lack detail in comparison to other ones. And then at the end there's some just contrast and color checks involved, where you just make sure you can kind of get the best version from this piece possible, you know, without having to paint much more. Actually changing the rock here on the left side, I just noticed, and adding more detail to that too. Some more negative spaces and some leaves on the tree. If you have questions about any of this, you know, or just in general about painting or digital painting, about Procreate or the tools or anything like that, just ask in the comments below, you know. Gonna try to reply to everyone. Oh yeah, and of course, some additional white flowers in the far foreground. Those I liked when I put them in. Even though it's such a small thing, you know, and it's not that noticeable, I think they do add something, and they help. So as you can see, there's not too much changing at this point. We're late into the process. Just some details and refining further some of the little shapes, you know. Although I did add that foreground on the top left here to just add further framing to the scene, so it's not so just empty in that area. So just some more edge cleanup on the clouds, and this is the finished cover. You can see it, you know, being used on Steam and in the game menu, I think. And yeah, thanks for watching again. I hope you enjoyed it.